Hello, and welcome to the next installment in our customer webinar series, Advanced Threat Hunting with Network Metadata to Uncover the Unknown. My name is Eric Martin, and I'm a Senior Consulting Analyst here at Vectra. So, quick introduction. My name is Eric. I've been working a bunch of places, higher ed, public, private, and just really enjoy playing with data and digging into threats. Just a little bit of quick housekeeping before we get going. In the upper left-hand corner, you have the media player. Slides are in the middle. Down the bottom, we have our resources list. And then our questions are on the bottom right-hand side. And also, please don't forget to take the survey at the end. We'll be keeping an eye on the questions and trying to answer them as they come up, so please feel free. So, before we get started, I just want to set the stage and go over the agenda for today. So the point of this webinar is to build on previous webinars, specifically Threat Hunting Part 1 given by Matt and John. For those of you who are unable to attend that, I recommend watching it after this one, as there are some things that I'll be referencing here. So we're going to start off spending a few minutes talking about the differences between threats, vulnerabilities, and risk, to ground us with some definitions. Next, we'll go into PrintNightmare, followed by Log4Shell, and lastly, Kerberoasting. This recording will be available afterwards, as will the references, and we'll also post searches and relevant dashboards to the GitHub page. So, Matt, as I mentioned, Matt and John went over this. Why should we hunt? Continuous improvement. It's just great practice. The best way to become proficient at something is just to do it over and over and regularly sharpening that skill. Creating different searches, visualizations, timelines, dashboards, just help answering everyday questions. Have a question, why is this? And let's try and answer it. You get a better understanding of your environment. Why is this happening in my environment? Is this normal? There are plenty of times where I'll be looking at something and is this normal? Do a little bit of searching for it. Microsoft article, yes, this is normal. Also, it helps us get familiar with the software bill of materials, or the SBOM. For those of you not familiar with the SBOM, just like when we're going to build a building, we have a bill of materials. When we're building software, there's a bill of materials. And for instance, which we'll cover later on, Log4j, most of us probably didn't directly install Log4j into our network. We installed something that comes with Log4j. And so digging through our data really helps us identify those things. Hunting can also help analysts grow and be more efficient by practicing their investigation skills. Helps you develop and test hypotheses. In the act of constantly repeatedly forming and testing hypotheses will not only help an analyst grow as an individual, but they'll also come to understand the environment better, making them more efficient. Helps us share ideas. So documenting threat hunting exercises allows for the pooling of resources. Vectra works really well across teams of all sizes. Having working on various size teams, I can say that creating searches, dashboards, and everything else really helps me document a new way of finding information. And then also, I can share that with my team, and now they have that knowledge. More often than not, a teammate has a question or a better way to do something or a new way to do something or a spin on it, and now we just keep leveling up. This also gives us the opportunity, and it also lets us hold on to it for a long time. This also gives us the opportunity to be proactively alerted when certain behaviors occur on the network. We take a search, we set it up as a custom model in Detect, and now 24/7, this is looking at it. And this will help reduce dwell time of attackers, as well as reduce mean time to resolution. So, as the title of the webinar says, we're focused on threat hunting with network metadata. Obviously, network metadata is not the only information source you can hunt with, though it does provide some distinct advantages. I'm a big fan of the saying, the network doesn't lie. So rootkits can obfuscate and hide things. Controls can be subverted, and that's not even counting devices that cannot have an agent installed on them or any unapproved devices. As long as the sensor has visibility into an attack, there'll be corresponding metadata relating to those network attack techniques. So before we jump in, let's just do a quick recap of what Recall does, just to ground us, since we'll be using that throughout the webinar. So like I said, we'll be using Cognito Recall. And as a quick review, Cognito Recall stores vector-enriched Zeek formatted metadata. It is for easy adoption. It's based on the open source Kibana interface. It's hosted in an Amazon AWS instance owned and maintained by Vectra. And at a minimum, it contains 2 weeks worth of retention, though licenses can extend that retention period. So the metadata is broken down into several streams. There are several Vectra-specific metadata streams, such as iSession, which think your level 3 data, right, with your tuple, your origin host, origin port, responding host, responding port. And then you get more into specific things. So HTTP, for instance, has more layer 7 application layer data, such as your user agent, the URI. Vectra is always working to identify useful protocols to parse and data to add to these streams. So before we discuss threat hunting, I want to take a brief moment or two to discuss threats, vulnerabilities, and risk. As Matt and John mentioned in Threat Hunting Part 1, threat hunting can be portrayed as cool, though in reality, it can be tough and sometimes bear little fruit, or not at all. Also, as Jonathan mentioned in identifying early warning indicators, knowing what to action is important. One of the greatest lessons an instructor gave me was on risk. While risk is related to vulnerabilities, they're not equivalent. A vulnerability exists when something is susceptible to attack or is poorly defended. Vulnerabilities are there with or without threats. A vulnerability and a threat coming together is what creates risk. So let's take a moment and consider humans versus sharks to see this in action. Sharks are indeed a threat. I recently vacationed on Cape Cod, and multiple times swimmers had to leave the water for a period of time due to shark activity and the risk they posed. Humans are vulnerable to shark attacks. I swam in the water when there wasn't any shark activity, of course, and I was fine since the threat was not present, despite the fact that I am indeed vulnerable to a shark's sharp teeth. Now, if I disregarded the lifeguard's instructions and stayed in the water, threat would meet risk, which would lead to vulnerability, which would lead to risk. So, in summary, threat times vulnerability equals risk. I mention this so we don't lose sight of the goal, which is not only to identify threats, the goal is to identify credible threats and work towards actionable findings. As we work through some of these examples, we'll focus on not just the initial indicators, but drilling down to see whether these actually have a credible risk to the environment. All right. For our first threat, we're going to discuss PrintNightmare. We're going to discuss PrintNightmare and how to hunt for it. So, PrintNightmare, it started off as a low severity bug from Microsoft, though very quickly, about 2 weeks later, they upgraded it to critical. If you look at NVD, NVD lists 2021-1675 as PrintNightmare, though Microsoft says actual PrintNightmare is 2021-34-527. It maps to MITRE attack technique TA002 execution. Then you also have 1068, which is exploitation for privilege escalation. It's low complexity. and what we're doing is spoolerservice.exe. So spoolerservice.exe executes queued in an arbitrary DLL. Also, it's available in Metasploit, and which just really brings the complexity down. It is ripe for further exploitation. Again, success equals system privileges. So when you go to print, if the print driver is installed on the server, we're all set. We set up a new printer, point the printer at the drivers, all set. Say though you're setting up a printer for a new printer, the drivers aren't there, it asks you, please give me the driver disk. You download the drivers and you set them up. Where PrintNightmare comes in is PrintNightmare sends over a specially crafted DLL, creates a printer, sends a specially crafted DLL that is malicious, and that in turn, now system runs that code, and there we are. So detecting PrintNightmare. There is no event log visibility by default. We can enable Microsoft Windows print service operational logging, though specially crafted DLLs might avoid errors and logging. So how do we find it? Network metadata, DCE RPC. So we're going to look for the specific DCE metadata, specifically RPC add printer driver, RPC add printer driver EX, and then there's also possibly the Samba RPC async add printer driver. So again, point and print is where you jump on your network, and I've worked at all sorts of jobs. Some places I work, the printers come through your network login scripts. New user, you log on a computer for the first time, printers are all set up. Some places just say, find it in Active Directory, and there you go. Whereas I've been in other places and just told, yeah, it's that printer over there. So we open up run, we type in / print server / printer, and that will do some of this in reverse, where RPC add printer driver, open up, we grab the, on Windows servers, it's the $print share, and now we grab that. On the flip side, an admin creating a new printer would load drivers to $print, create the new one, and load drivers to $print. And that's where we're going to start looking. So let's take a look. We're going to pivot over to Recall. We're going to pivot over to Recall, and we're going to see how this works in action. Okay, so here we are with our recall screen. By default, last 7 days. Out of the box, there are a lot of saved searches, and one of them is PrintNightmare. So we're going to go to search while we're in Discover, and we're going to look up Cognito TTP, DCE RPC, potential CVE, print driver added. And so this loads up a saved search. And again, this is what I was talking about, where we can all create searches and then share them out with people. So what we're looking for here right now is we're using the DCE RPC metadata source. We're looking for the spool SS endpoint, and specifically the operations are RPC add printer driver EX and RPC add printer driver. Well, this one kind of gives it away, but we have this host name Callie going to a server with the username of Pat and adding a printer driver. And so as we look through here, we can see it's going through and adding it. And actually, they even tried doing it as administrator. So the question is, just because we're calling it now, this is, again, 2 parts. So we tried adding it. The next question is, are they able to get it to load the driver? So typically, as I said, this is a Metasploit. Attackers will call this, and then it's going to call back, and they're going to say, the location of my driver disk is calibox/printshare malicious.dll. So now we're going to say, okay, next step here is let's look in the Samba. So we're going to say new, and we're going to go into SMB files. And what we're going to say is where that 192.168 was our host that was calling out. So let's see where it is the originating host. So id.origin underbar h 192.168.2.10 and id.responder underbar p 445. So show me where this host called out to Samba. And now we have a lot of data here, and let's start pulling this apart a little bit. So things that I would like to see are the originating host name and the responding host name, the path, and the name. And so we can see that it's going here, but it's going to DCO2, which means that this is likely okay. We have 56 hits here, so we can look through here. Granted, this lab does not have much data in it. So on yours, what we can also do, though, is take a look and make a visualization where visualize based on responding host name. So if we hit over responding host name, and now we can see DCO2 is the responder. So this is unlikely that we called back to get this. Now, that doesn't mean that none of this bears looking into. However, there is not it looks like it has not progressed. I would still look into that host and see why that host is there. So, we have a question here. So yeah, great question. Is there a way for us to include a list of known print servers or other artifacts to automatically filter out before we begin our hunt? Yes. So while we're doing our print servers, what we can say is we can add a filter here, and we can do a combining. So if we have our, so our responding host name would be, say, is one of, right, print server-01, print server-02, and now we can save those, and now that's not in there. Oh, I'm sorry, is not one of. And so if we accidentally do that, we can just flip and exclude those matches. Likewise, what we're looking for is odd behavior. So a workstation calling this to a server is not okay. You expect, again, like I said, Windows 10 user going in and calling Windows 10 user and calling out to the domain, to the print server, fine. Other way is not okay. So thank you for that great question. So we're going to progress on to our next topic. Oh. Back. And we're going to look at log4shell. So log4shell. While the specific technique is MITRE 1059.004 execution command and scripting interpreter Unix shell, it's often paired with T1133 external remote services and T1210 exploitation of remote services. As in most cases, it's not one thing, it's one thing to lead to another to lead to another. So this is our initial access. Threat actors and red teams need a foothold in your environment. remote code execution vulnerabilities on publicly accessible hosts present high-value targets to do this. And so some publicly accessible hosts are actually on the internal network, and through various controls, be it reverse proxies, load balancers, are exposed to the outside world. And now this means that a attacker successfully compromising one of these hosts could actually automatically gain access to your internal network. On top of that, security best practice is to have your logs stored offline so attackers can't alter logs. Attacker comes in, they want to hide their tracks, they wipe the logs. So let's syslog, dump them into our log server, into our SIM. Well, in this case, as we talked about with our software bill of materials, your SIM or your log server might be running log4j. So now, even if you just have a web server that's not vulnerable, that syslog server running log4j is vulnerable. So on top of that, this vulnerability has a base CVSS score of 10.0 out of 10.0. Given how pervasive it is and how critical the vulnerability is, attackers are constantly targeting systems in what can be thought of as background radiation. Just because an attacker attempted to exploit this vulnerability does not mean your system is compromised, and it can be hard determining what events are worth digging in or how much deeper we should be digging in. So let's look at the anatomy. So thanks to govcert.ch, this is a great Creative Commons graphic. So here we have an attacker inserts a GIND lookup into a header field that is likely to be logged. Think user agent, URI, anything that's going to get processed. That goes in. Your vulnerable server, or even your potential server, grabs that, and then it parses it with log4j. And also your SIM does and anything else that's taking that logging, anything in that chain. Log4j interpolates that string and queries a malicious LDAP server. So now it calls out to the malicious LDAP server. Malicious LDAP server responds with directory information that has our payload. And now Java deserializes, downloads the payload, and executes it. So what else can we do? Further attack with more code execution. Attacker now has a foothold in your environment. Like I said, if it was your SIM, they have access to your logs. How do we detect log4j? It's really what we're looking for is this GIND string right here, this JNDI string right here, and probably followed by a callback, as well as calls to external LDAP hosts. I had said earlier, this is pretty trivial. This is a curl. Curl minus a $, curly brackets, JNDI, colon, log server that you can get from any LDAP server you can get, host, done. This is one line. As long as you have the malicious infrastructure, one line. I've also seen people tag it in with a basic command, base64, grab the next stage. A member of my team just pointed out last week the Cyber Safety Review Board, which is part of CISA.gov, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, published a review of the December 2021 log4j event, and they're calling this endemic. And they stress the software bill of materials as well. And so, additionally, the FTC intends to use its full legal authority to pursue companies that fail to take reasonable steps to protect consumer data. Now, reasonable is different depending on what size you are. However, being able to look at this data and being able to see where we are is a huge benefit. So we have a great question coming in. What should we look for after we identify a log for shell scanner? Any tips on investigating the scanning host? Sure. So we identify a log for shell scanner. That's actually a great thing with filtering, which we'll get into. Nowadays, more what I'm tending to see is it's just more Nessus. It's more everybody having their hands wrapped around this, and it's Nessus going out. So we actually have a couple of filters to put in some of our searches. You also want to look for the callback. And there is some infrastructure, for instance, interact.sh, Huntress, and a couple other ones are not just spun up for log4j. So depending on how we hunt, we might get false positives. We might just get something like Shodan scanning us. And depending on your take on that, you might just want to block those things or just take a look at it and see how you'll process it. So now's a great time to pivot to recall for our log for shell. So again, we have a TTP a save thing loaded up here. So in Discover, we have another one set up. We have a couple of these, 4228, attempted compromise. And the reason why we say attempted compromise is because this may or may not be an actual compromise. This is a threat, but is there a vulnerability? So we have a host coming in here, and it's calling out to, it's over here. As I said with the question, it's good to have this filter here to say right here, local origin false. So if we don't have this turned on, we can get really just drowned with a lot of our Nessus traffic. So having this disabled is helpful, though occasionally enabling this filter and looking to ensure that all you have is Nessus traffic or all of that internal traffic is what you expect is also a very good thing, right? So that's make a hypothesis and let's just question ourselves on a constant basis. So again, we have our user agent. It's our JNDI LDAP log for shell Huntress. And this is just anybody can go on, create a key, it grabs it out and does it. So now the question is, did it call out? So what we can do now is, let's go look here. So what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in on this time frame right here. And then we're going to pivot over to LDAP. And we're going to see what happened. So we're going to expand this again. And now we're going to go to LDAP. So right now we're not, oh, and also we're going to get rid of that. So one way that might be easier, we're also going to pin that. There you go. That's what we want. Let's go back to LDAP. So now what we're going to look at is our originating host. Origin underbar host name, colon, oops, ID origin H. ID.origin underbar H, colon, that. And so now, now we have an issue. ID origin H did call out in this time frame for this. So let's add in the query that we did. We're seeing object class star. So now we're seeing some things coming in here. We can also look at, we also have some callbacks for some other dashboards, some other searches for callback. So this right here says this host probably called back and fell for this. Well, let's look a different way. So if we go back into searches, we're going to say new. We're going to open another one. We're going to say log. We're going to look at the callback domains and the callback IP addresses. And again, we have this calling back to log4shellhuntress.com. So this is by the domain. Like I said, it could just be for other things. So let's look at, just to make sure, let's also look at the IPs. Log4shell IP addresses. So we don't have it calling back on IPs, but that's why we look at it both ways. So this is good, but we're jumping around a lot. Wouldn't it be great if we had it all in front of us? So while I know there are some dashboards that are set up, let's build a dashboard quickly and just kind of take all these things in together. So we're going to build a quick dashboard. So we're going to click dashboard here, say create new, and it's empty. We're going to fill it up. So we're going to say add. So one thing we want is our 44228 attempted save search. That's what we want. Attempted compromise. We're going to click on this here, and this is now added to here. So this is for right here. In our lab, we only have the last 7 days, so we'll just do a quick last 7 days. But again, though, since we have that filter, we're going to edit this quickly here and just turn this off. Just go back and save that quickly. Go back to our dashboard here. There we are. Now we have our attempted compromise. That's great. So it's attempted. What should we look at? Did anybody succeed? So that's the next question. So let's add. Actually, before we get ahead of ourselves, let's save. In case anything happens, I don't want things to break. Threat, hunting webinar, log4shell. We're going to save this. So now we're going to edit this. And we're going to add something else. And now we're going to look for the callbacks. And that's now added in here too. And now we can see that victim right here did call back. And so now, rather than jumping all over and we're going to save this again. And now, rather than jumping all over, we can now see that, indeed, on July 15th at 3:36, somebody called out. And then shortly after that, somebody else came in and did this. And we look at this, it's on Log4Shell Huntress 1389. Okay, we are definitely vulnerable to that, and some things probably happened. So this is definitely now, this host is definitely now a good candidate to contain, do some research into. Any tips for investigating the scanning host? Yeah, so now what we want to do is look at what this host is doing. So let's take a look at this original host name. We're going to pin this so we can go a little bit faster. And we're going to go up into the host dashboard. We're going to see what this thing was doing. We're not seeing much here, but here, though, we can see in here data that was going in and out, connections to external domains, internal connections it made. Maybe now that it's under some control, it might start enumerating Kerberos accounts. And this is now where you can drill in and keep going there. Thank you for the great questions. All right. So that actually leads us right back into Kerberoasting. Just waiting for my slides to catch up. So Kerberoasting. Before we cover Kerberoasting, I just want to cover a quick refresher on Kerberos, because it can be very dense and it definitely helps out. So Luke from Threat Intel here at Vectra has a really great analogy for Kerberos that I'd love to share with you all today. So you want to go to a carnival or fairground, you want to ride the roller coaster. So this carnival is pretty modern. It has some computers, and only the gate attendant has to handle credit cards. Everything after that is all done through the machines. So you walk in, and we pay to enter the carnival. We hand the gate attendant our credit card, runs the credit card, and we receive an entrance ticket. Now, we use this entrance ticket to request a ride ticket. So in this case, a roller coaster ticket. So we take our entrance ticket, we pop it into the ticket machine, and we'd say, 1 roller coaster ticket, please. Ticket machine pops that out, gives us our initial entrance ticket, as well as our roller coaster ticket. We take that, we hand that off to the ride attendant, and the ride attendant doesn't need our credit card. The ride attendant doesn't need our entrance ticket. By virtue of having that ride ticket for the roller coaster, all of those things have happened, and the attendant doesn't worry. So likewise with Kerberos, we authenticate. We enter our credentials in. We authenticate against our authentication server, our AS. AS checks our credentials and hands us a TGT, a ticket granting ticket. We now take this TGT and we use it to request service tickets. So when we want to request a service ticket, we ask the ticket granting server. The ticket granting server will now grant us a service ticket. So for instance, this might be print, right? We want to print, we want to access files. I say I want to access the file share 01. Checks it, checks our permissions, grants us the service ticket, hands us the service ticket. We then now take that service ticket and hand that service ticket to the file server, and we then get to access the resource. So in here, our authentication server and our ticket granting server, those are our key distribution center, and in AD land, that's our domain controller. Quick thing on service principal names. Service principal names are set and read via the set SPN command. Since we want users to access this data, it's available to all users and attackers. So set SPN minus L hostname is how we get all of the service principal names set for hosts. So for instance, set SPN minus cap L hostname for file server 1 would give us CIFS, and minus L username would say who it's authenticated with for the different user. SPNs identify unique instance of a service, and what I mean by an instance of a service is we have here HTTP www.domain.local, but we also have another www server listening. So this one is for the default port, we don't have it, but then we also have another instance on port 8080. So also, you can see these are all in alphabetical. CIFS is file server. All workstations are CIFS servers, admin $share, C $share. LDAP is going to be exposed by your domain controllers, obviously. TermServe, your jump host, that's our Microsoft Remote Desktop services. And then also Term Server Workstation 1. Plenty of people use Microsoft Remote Assistance, so that is also TermServe. But then host is not alphabetical here. Host is a specific use case. So the host SPN is for the computer account, and the long-term key is used when creating service tickets. This is a very important host account. Also, it's also a stand-in for any of these SPNs. So unless explicitly defined, Microsoft AD uses the host SPN for anything here. So www, Winds, UPS, Time, comment ones, Scheduler, IIS admin, HTTP, event log, alerter, DHCP, DNS. So just because we see host doesn't mean it's bad, though it is worth looking into. Now, also, being able to get at the host key will let you, say, for instance, if you can successfully compromise the host key, you can, say, for instance, schedule tasks. We have a question in here where, let's see. So MITRE attack, and we'll come up to that one in a minute. So MITRE attack, it has its own subcategory, T1558.003, Stealer Forge tickets, Kerberoasting. So it requires a valid ticket granting ticket. Again, any valid domain account, guest, user, terminal that never gets access. So next up, we're going to look for service principal names with weak hashes, RC4. RC4 was the default. You didn't even have an option until about 2008, server 2008 with AES. So what's going to stand out here is the request is for RC4. So this is a downgrade attack, right? Normally, hashes might have AES 128, AES 256. We're saying, please give me the RC4 hashes. We're going to crack the hashes offline. Why? Attackers, red teamers don't want to get caught. However, there is zero visibility. While they're cracking, we do have the ability to see other things. And why do we use it? We gain persistence, we can go escalation, and we can move laterally throughout the environment. We can start as user and then just bump our way up to SQL admin if we want. So again, offline password cracking. That is the biggest thing where I hope they do it offline. I hope they don't, but they probably will. Detecting Kerberoasting. Yes, we can turn on event logs. They're off by default, and the reason is because they can get really noisy. So you can enable it via audit Kerberos service ticket operations. So 4769, which is a Kerberos service ticket or TGS, was requested. This happens all the time, every day, in and out. This is just normal part of Active Directory. And then 4770, a Kerberos service ticket was renewed. Again, not as common, however, this is just normal process how this works. So, how do we find it? Kerberos, RC4, HMAX requests and responses. Also, LDAP, right? So first, before we go and ask for them, we might start asking, who are all those people? So that SAM account type down there, that 805306, is usernames. So show me all the usernames who have a service principal name. Not always spooky, however, definitely suspicious. So just to see it in action, so we have our attacker here with valid credentials, makes an LDAP call, and it says, get me all the user accounts that have a service principal name. The domain controller only too happily answers, yep, I have one, the service SCCM account does. Okay, what's its SPN? Oh, its SPN is HTTP SCCM-01, blah, blah, blah. Great. Can I please have the SPN ticket for that? Absolutely. Oh, I need it RC4 HMAC, please. Oh, sure. And so this hash right here is Kerberos 5, TGS, so ticket granting service, on $23 means RC4 HMAC. And then here's our service SCM, here's our thing, and there's our hash. And now we take that, and again, we can just do this with PowerSploit, invoke Kerberoast, anybody. We just grab it, we put it on a host where we have a foothold. We load and invoke Kerberoast. We say invoke Kerberoast, and it'll dump them out to Hashcat, and then start hashing those offline. So we have another question here that Kerberoasting appears to be rather complex. Are there any instances where we may see similar activity that it's actually benign? Yes, there are a couple things, and we will get into that when we, I'll definitely highlight those in Recall. So let me pivot over to Recall here. One second. Go. Sorry about that. So again, we're going to search dashboards, and I really want to highlight this built-in Kerberoasting dashboard. It's in by default. A lot of people see it, but I talk to a lot of people, and it can definitely be daunting, right? It can really be daunting. So that's one of the reasons why I really want to highlight this and then drill down a little bit more. So again, Kerberos tickets can be requested by attackers. You can sniff from network traffic. And so we're monitoring for ticket responses with weak ciphers that can be potentially cracked offline. So here we have a chart. Here's our count of requests as time goes on. And this is just density, right? This is our velocity here. This is our think of this as your velocity map. And so we have this one host, 192.168.2.109, and 2,000 requests in an hour. And then also 6,600 requests in an hour. Okay, that is definitely pushing it. That is definitely not cool. So now we're going to scroll down. Excuse me for 1 second. And we see again this host sticking out here. Pat PC, pretty much 9,000 requests. It's really kind of sticking out here. So why? Well, let's look at this. So for one, let us drill into this host. So we're going to filter for this value right here. What we're going to see is here's the ID originating host. Let's pin this, and let's go back into Discover, and let's just take a look at what this host is doing. So we're going to go into Kerberos, and what I want to see is I want the client, so the Kerberos client, right? I want the Kerberos service. I want the requested ciphers. I want the reply ciphers. That's pretty good. And then we'll also say success. So right off the bat here, we have Pat requesting RC4 HMAC. And if we're, so again, you know, right, we could be requesting AES 256 CTS HMAC SHA-1, AES 128, RC4, RC4 HMAC EXP. No, we're requesting straight up RC4 HMAC. To that question, there are definitely some instances where you're going to have those legacy things. I have seen environments where servers from, right, you had NT3, 351 to NT4 to Windows 2000, and those have just dragged the whole way. And passwords haven't changed, whatnot, so that can happen. So that's definitely a thing where we're going to build a filter and take a look at those things to filter that data out. However, though, on a pretty recent one, again, we shouldn't be seeing that. So now we also have, we're looking there. Let's see, we're looking in, there's Pat PC. We're looking for CIFS, KERB-TGT. So we have all this right in here. HTTP, so these HTTP web servers we're asking. HTTP SQL 1, somebody decided to put an HTTP service on a SQL server. Maybe we ran out of space. Why not put them together? It's faster. Well, it's there. Also, of note, those computers don't need to be around anymore, right? So you have a server SQL 01, SQL 2008, and then we go to SQL 2012, and you decom that server, we delete SQL 2008, or maybe it's just off and you have that VM or hard drive sitting somewhere bubble wrapped in the offsite safe in case you ever need it. Those artifacts are still in Active Directory. Those keys still exist. So now, from a really old one, we can grab this SQL 01 host might not have been around forever. It might not have been around for 5 years, and we can still grab this and now get this RC4 HMAC key, and now we can crack this key. So that's really what it comes into. So also, though, what's another way, though, to see if this is weird? So how do we know if, okay, I have an older environment, I have a lot of legacy stuff. How do I know? Well, let's go to LDAP. So if we go over to LDAP, right, we're going to go into LDAP here, and we're going to get rid of these things. And what we're going to say is what I'm looking for is specifically the attributes, like we had mentioned. And the query, right? And let's see, base object 2. So now I'm curious. So let's look in here. And we have, let's find this host that we're looking for, which is this one right here. And our query is, oh, there we go. There's that thing I mentioned right there. Let's drill in on this. So here we go. Query, give me this thing, and all I want back is the distinguished name, the same account name, and the service principal name. And pretty much for all of these, that's what comes back here. Well, is that normal? So rather than jumping to, oh, that's not good, let's look at other people. So is anybody else doing this? Who else is doing this behavior? So we have 20,000 hits over the last 7 days. Original host name. This is the only user doing that behavior. Okay, probably not good. Typically what we see is typical data. And this is also why getting in ahead of time is good, because you can see what's typical for your environment. If we just turn off this filter right now, typically what we're going to see is something along the lines of maybe, for instance, policies. We can just look at what queries are common. Let's inspect here. Right, so object class star is kind of polluted because we were doing this, different categories. So that's why. And now we also have what are the next one also is, what does it respond with? That's another question that I'm curious with. So we can either pivot back, or we can stay in our visualize. and we can go into terms, and rather than query, we can say attributes. We can say play. And now we can see right here, I'm just going to turn this on my side here. Let's kind of give everybody's neck a little break. Right, so by far now, these three are the top ones. If we get rid of Pat, though, if we get rid of that Pat PC, what happens? So let's take that one out of the mix and see what happens. So let's add a filter in here, and let's just say original host name is not Pat PC. Save. Well, now all of a sudden this kind of cleans up, and it's a little more normal distribution. So now we just learned that not only is it Kerberos behavior, however, there's that precursor of doing that LDAP search for those things. So now we can look in there and start targeting those, suspicious LDAP queries. I know we're getting towards the end of it. So just want to make sure we don't have any more questions. Let me switch back. So just to include some resources, the top one is the YouTube link to Matt and John's presentation on threat hunting with network metadata. GitHub, some threat hunting dashboards. We'll post them up after this. The MITRE ATT&CK framework. I also want to link to the CISA.gov. There's also a Russian state sponsor. Cyber actors gain network access by exploiting PrintNightmare. So I'm just waiting to see if there's any other questions. But otherwise, though, I just want to say thank you so much for coming along with me today on this, and hope to see you soon.